It was a random Tuesday night, the kind you forget before it's even over, and I had just pulled into the parking lot of a shitty strip mall gym I'd recently started going to because I was trying to lose the 10 pounds my doctor wouldn't shut up about. Normally, I went in the morning before work, but that day I had a late start and figured what the hell, I'll sweat through the guilt of skipping breakfast. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a quick hour on the treadmill, some squats I'd half-ass, and a protein bar in the car on the way home. I wasn't ready for what I saw through the glass front doors before I even stepped out of my car. There she was, Clara, my wife, not in workout gear, not in the clothes she left the house in that morning, and definitely not alone. She stood near the juice bar, laughing, like full-on laughing, head tilted back, eyes glowing in that way they hadn't when she looked at me in what felt like months. The guy she was with? Button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, not a gym employee. I knew most of the staff. He wasn't one of them. He had that put-together look, the kind of clean-cut confidence that comes from knowing people like you before you open your mouth. He leaned in as he handed her a smoothie, touching her arm, not her hand, her arm, the way guys do when they're testing boundaries they've already crossed before. I didn't even remember turning off my car, but I must have because the next thing I knew, I was walking into the gym like I wasn't on the edge of throwing up. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Clara had told me she was going to her sister's to help with their nephew's science project. She said she might be late. That was 2 hours ago. There was no kid, no baking soda volcano, no school glue, just her and this guy with a smug face and a smoothie in hand. I ducked into the weight room, out of sight, but with a clear line of vision. I watched them. She didn't see me, or if she did, she didn't flinch. They were too close. Not overtly touching, but everything about them screamed intimacy. The way she tilted her body toward him, how he leaned in like her breath belonged to him. She was smiling with her whole face, that smile I hadn't seen since. Shit, maybe Christmas? I stood there, gripping a dumbbell like it was the only thing keeping my hand from shaking. I didn't know what to do. Confront her? Walk out? Throw the weight through the fucking juice bar window? But then, just as suddenly, she leaned in and whispered something to him, and they both laughed again before heading toward the back hallway, where the locker rooms and massage area were. Yeah, there was a massage room. And yeah, my mind went there immediately. So I followed. Not close, just enough to hear the elevator ding. This gym had a private access room upstairs. Trainers used it sometimes. Members weren't allowed unless they had sessions booked in advance. The elevator opened. They stepped inside. She hit the button. The doors closed. And I knew. I didn't guess. I knew. I didn't need texts or lipstick on a collar or some cliché trace of perfume on the bedsheets. I saw it with my own eyes. The comfort, the confidence, the routine of it all. This wasn't their first time. Hell, it probably wasn't their fifth. They had a rhythm, a flow, a goddamn system. She had been lying to me for weeks, maybe longer, telling me about late nights with family, fake errands, stress from work, and all the while she had been meeting this guy, laughing with him, walking into elevators with him, and who knows what else. When I got back to my car, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel like some movie scene. I just sat there, staring at the gym doors, watching people go in and out like nothing had changed. For them, it hadn't. For me, everything had. I was in a whole new version of my life now, one where I was no longer the only man in my marriage. And the worst part? She looked happier with him than she had with me in months. Maybe longer. I didn't drive home. I didn't even start the car. I just sat there, gripping the wheel, replaying every conversation we'd had over the last month, looking for cracks. The cracks weren't small. I had just refused to see them. And now, here I was, parked outside a goddamn gym, learning that my wife's love had an expiration date she hadn't bothered to mention. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I just sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, staring out the window into the dark backyard, trying to put it all together. I watched the motion sensor light flick on when a raccoon wandered through the grass, then watched it turn off again. The hours passed like I was waiting for some answer to show up, something to explain how this all made sense. But nothing did. By the time the sun started coming up, I heard the front door open. Clara was back. She moved quietly, thinking everyone was asleep. I stayed still, didn't say a word, let her think she was safe in her lie for just a few more minutes. Her keys hit the counter, then her shoes came off. She walked past the kitchen and into the hall, straight to the bathroom. I stood up and followed. I opened the bathroom door without knocking. She was in the middle of pulling off her top, halfway out of the clothes I'd never seen before. She looked at me, startled, then dropped her arms. Jesus, Derek, you scared the hell out of me. I bet. Where were you? She hesitated, too long for it to be anything but bad. I told you. Heather's. We were up late talking. I ended up crashing on the couch. My phone died. You were at the gym. Her face didn't move at first. Then her jaw tightened slightly. I saw it, even in the dim light from the hallway. What are you talking about? I saw you. Last night. You weren't with Heather. You were at the gym. With him. Who? Don't do that. You know exactly who I mean. Tall guy. Brown hair. Juice bar. Private elevator. I watched you get in. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I waited, watching her process the fact that the lie was done. Whatever story she had built, it was over. There was no way out of it now, and she knew it. Still, she tried. That's not what it looked like. You really think you can say that, and I'll just forget everything I saw? I'm serious, Derek. You don't know what you saw. I saw my wife walk into a private room at a gym with a man who touched her like he owned her. I saw you laughing with him like he was the best part of your day. You weren't drunk. You weren't lost. You were happy. Happier than you've looked around me in months. I didn't sleep with him. But you wanted to. She flinched, like the words hurt. Good. They were supposed to. It wasn't supposed to go that far. But it did. I didn't mean for it to. Was that the first time? Silence. That was all I needed. Derek, how long? She sat on the edge of the tub, her head in her hands. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just sat there like the weight of finally being caught was heavier than the guilt of what she had done. 3 months. His name? She looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark, where did you meet him? At the gym. It started as conversation. Then smoothies after workouts. Then lies. I didn't plan it. It just happened. No. You made it happen. You picked the days. You picked the clothes. You picked the lie about Heather. You booked the room upstairs. You planned it all. I didn't sleep with him, Derek. I swear to God. Do you want to? She looked up, eyes wide. What? Do you want to? If I wasn't in the picture, would you? Would you be with him? She looked away. That's all I needed. I walked out, straight to the bedroom. I opened the closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and started packing. T-shirts, jeans, socks. Not because I had a plan, but because I needed to move. If I stayed still, I'd lose it. I could hear her behind me in the hall, not saying anything, just standing there like she was the one trying to figure out what happened. You're leaving? No. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Maybe the next few. You need time to think. And I need to be somewhere I can breathe. Can we talk about this? We just did. And you lied for the first half of it. You don't get to ask for a conversation now. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't think about me at all. I zipped the bag, grabbed my wallet and keys, and walked out without another word. No yelling. No door slamming. Just silence. That kind of silence that means there's no more pretending. No more versions of the truth. Just the fact that something was broken, and it wasn't going to fix itself. I didn't know what came next. I didn't have a plan. But I knew I couldn't stay in that house another second. Not with the image of her walking into that elevator still burned into my brain. The hotel was 20 minutes from the house. One of those highway-side places with numbered rooms and the faint smell of bleach in the hallway. I checked in without looking at the receptionist, gave a fake smile, and climbed the stairs instead of using the elevator. Once inside, I threw the duffel bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for what felt like an hour. I didn't turn on the TV or take off my shoes. I wasn't even sure why I came here except that I couldn't stay home. Not with her walking around like this was still a marriage. I didn't sleep again, second night in a row, just paced the floor until morning like I was waiting for something to click into place. Around 10, I texted Clara. One word, talk. No greeting, no punctuation. She replied within seconds, told me to come home after lunch, said she'd make sure the kids were out of the house. When I walked in, she was sitting at the dining table, hands folded in front of her like she was in a meeting. Her face looked pale, eyes puffy, hair still damp from a shower. I sat across from her, but didn't say anything. I waited. Derek, I've been thinking about everything, and I know it doesn't help now, but I really am sorry. What do you want me to do with that? I don't know. I just wanted you to hear it. What else did you do with him? Her lips pressed together like she had to hold something in. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. I didn't sleep with him, Not technically, but we were physical. Kissing. Touching. There were a few times it came close. You let it get close. That wasn't an accident. No, it wasn't. Were you planning on telling me? Or just keep going until I caught you? I was going to end it. Sure. I was. That night, we didn't do anything. I told him I couldn't keep doing it, that it wasn't right. That's why we were sitting at the juice bar so long. That's why we were talking so much. I don't care about the juice bar. I care about the fact that you looked at another man the way you used to look at me, and I didn't even exist to you anymore. I haven't felt like myself for a long time, Derek. I don't even know when it started, but I felt disconnected from everything. That's not an excuse. That's a feeling you bring to your husband and talk about, not something you act on with a stranger. He's not a stranger. That makes it worse. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, opened the fridge just to have something to do. Everything inside looked normal. Milk, juice, leftovers in Tupperware. And it pissed me off how nothing reflected what had just happened between us. When you were with him, did you think about me at all? About the house, the kids, the 10 years we've built? Of course I did. No, you didn't. Because if you had, you wouldn't have done it. You would have stopped the first time he smiled at you. I was lonely. You weren't alone. You were married. You had me. We stopped talking, Derek. We stopped really being with each other. So you cheat. I didn't go looking for it. It just happened. No, you didn't trip and fall into an affair. You went back to the gym every week. You kept texting. You lied about where you were. You dressed up for him. You planned. Her mouth opened like she had something to say, but nothing came out. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples like she was the one who had been wronged. Why him? She shrugged slightly. He listened. He paid attention. He asked me how I was feeling. I didn't have to beg for conversation. He made me feel noticed. I see. You used to do that. I didn't answer that. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. It didn't matter now. I want to fix this, Derek. You already broke it. I know, but I want to try. I'll go to therapy. We can go together. I'll do whatever it takes. You think this is something we can fix? I don't know, but I want to try. I stared at her, wondering if she was actually serious or if this was just guilt talking. She looked back at me, face stiff, voice shaky, and I realized for the first time that she wasn't entirely sure of anything. She was throwing out hope like a rope and praying I'd grab it. Do you love him? No. Do you love me? I don't know. Then what the hell are we trying to fix? For the next 3 days, I didn't respond to her texts. I didn't return to the house. I stayed in the hotel, went to work like nothing had happened, came back, took showers without hearing her voice behind the bathroom door, ate alone, and watched the same news cycle repeat itself until the silence became more familiar than her voice ever was. I wasn't avoiding the conversation anymore. I had heard enough. What I needed now wasn't clarity or closure. What I wanted was to even the score. I didn't want her back. I wanted her to feel what I felt in that moment watching her step into that elevator. I wanted her to sit in that same silence, alone in a space that used to feel safe, realizing it had all changed. I remembered the password to her email, the one she used for everything. She never changed it, not even once since she opened it years ago. I sat with my laptop in the hotel bed and logged in. It wasn't hard to find him. There were calendar events titled Stretch Session and Deep Mobility, all set during work hours, all repeating weekly. There were invoices from the gym, receipts for private room rentals, one of them even marked as Massage Room 3. There were no love letters, no steamy emails, but the details were loud enough. He was a personal trainer, younger than both of us, and from what I could see on his public social media profile, he loved being the center of attention. Flexing in mirrors, posting motivational crap under shirtless photos, tagging himself at fancy restaurants with cryptic captions. It didn't take long to figure out where he worked or what days he was off. All I had to do was follow his routine. Friday afternoon, I waited near the back lot of the gym. I sat in my car with the windows down, sunglasses on, phone in my hand, pretending to scroll through something important. He walked out at 3:47, same as the day before. Alone, gym bag over his shoulder, phone in his hand, probably texting her. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. I walked inside the gym 5 minutes later and asked to speak to the manager. I had already called ahead and said I was interested in buying a bulk membership package for a private sports team I coordinated. They were expecting me. I shook hands with a guy named Eric, mid-30s, managerial smile, full of fake energy. I played the part, talked about potential contracts, team performance programs, private rooms, and elite access options. We discussed pricing. He printed out a sample agreement for review. At the end of the conversation, I smiled and said, "By the way, I wanted to confirm something before I sign anything. One of your trainers, Mark, I've heard some things about him giving, let's say, personalized services. Just want to make sure this is a professional environment, not some side hustle situation." Eric's expression changed. He paused, carefully. "What exactly do you mean?" "I mean, if I'm sending 20 young athletes to your gym, I want to know none of them are going to end up in the middle of a scandal because one of your guys can't separate work and his personal life." Eric nodded slowly, leaned back, and exhaled like someone who'd been holding back information for weeks. "I appreciate you bringing this up. Off the record, there have been a few complaints. Nothing formal, but there's been talk." I smiled again, thanked him for his time, took the sample contract, and left. That was all I needed. That night, I printed every receipt, every email, every calendar entry, and every digital breadcrumb Clara had left behind. I made a full copy of the shared cloud storage she didn't know I still had access to. There were photos of her with him, nothing explicit, but intimate enough. One of them at a cafe, her laughing with her hand on his knee. Another of her in gym clothes leaning into his shoulder. Then I called the gym again, using a different tone, a different voice. I introduced myself as a potential client's attorney and said I had documentation of inappropriate staff behavior involving a specific trainer and a married client, including misuse of private rooms and unsanctioned services during business hours. I made it clear this was not a legal action, yet, but that it would become one if anything went public. I offered to send redacted documentation. They asked for it. I emailed it that night. The next day, Clara called me 6 times. I didn't answer the first 5. I picked up on the 6th. "What happened? You'll have to be more specific." "Mark got fired." "That's unfortunate." "Don't play dumb with me, Derek. He says someone sent stuff to his boss. He said you showed up." "I did. You did this." "Yeah. Why?" "I thought maybe you should experience what it feels like to lose something you enjoy because someone you trusted turned it against you." "You think this makes us even?" "No. I think it makes us honest." She didn't respond right away. The silence stretched. "You don't get to act like the victim after this," she said. "I'm not the victim. I'm the husband you cheated on. I'm just the one who decided not to take it lying down." She hung up. She texted the next day, told me she'd be home all evening and that we needed to talk. It didn't sound like an apology. It didn't sound like anger either. It sounded like someone who realized the damage was too wide to ignore, but still hoped some part of it could be patched. I didn't respond right away. I drove around for a bit after work. No real destination, just moving to keep from thinking too hard. Eventually, I pulled into our driveway, sat in the car for a few minutes, and then walked into the house like I wasn't about to stand in the middle of a life we'd just torn apart. Clara was sitting on the couch, not dressed up, not rehearsed, just there in a hoodie and jeans like any other night before this one. The kids weren't home, probably at her sister's or somewhere else she could trust they wouldn't hear us. She looked up when I walked in, but didn't get up. I sat on the armchair across from her, leaned back, and waited for her to start. She looked tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from knowing you've run out of excuses. "I'm not going to defend anything anymore. I've already said what I had to say about it," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Good. But I want you to understand one thing. What happened with him didn't start because I hated you or because I wanted to hurt you. I was angry. I was lonely. I felt invisible. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but that's what it was. I didn't make you invisible. You just stopped looking in my direction." She nodded. "Maybe I did. I was still here, Clara. I came home every day. I asked how you were. I tried. You pulled away first. I know. And I should have told you how I was feeling instead of finding someone who filled the gap. I would have rather had the fight than the betrayal. I thought about telling you. A few times. But you didn't." She nodded again. For a while, neither of us spoke. I could hear the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the wall clock. All sounds that used to mean nothing now felt like they were filling up all the space we couldn't. "I thought revenge would make me feel better," I said finally. "I thought if I wrecked what you had with him, you'd understand what I felt that night I saw you walk into that elevator." She looked at me, not with anger, not with shame, just calm resignation. "Did it help?" "No. It didn't fix anything. Do you feel bad about it? No, not really. It just didn't feel like a win. Because there isn't one. Not anymore. So what do we do now? I don't know. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together. You said you didn't love him. But you also said you don't know if you still love me. I meant that I don't know what's left of us. I don't know if it's love or just history. History doesn't cheat. Love does, apparently. I didn't stop caring about you. You just stopped choosing me. She rubbed her eyes and sighed. So what now? Do we keep sleeping in different places? Do we pretend this can be fixed? Or do we end it? I've thought about that every night since I left. And the truth is, I don't want to live in a house where I'm constantly wondering who you're texting or if your gym membership is just another excuse. I don't want to be married to someone who needed a secret to feel whole. I'm not that person anymore. No, you're not. You're someone who saw what they were capable of and still went through with it. If we divorced right now, would you feel any better? I don't think I'd feel better. I think I'd finally feel honest. She nodded. Then maybe that's what we should do. Maybe it is. We sat in silence again. This time, there was nothing left to say. We both knew the line had already been crossed, and anything after that was just paperwork and logistics. There was no dramatic goodbye, no sudden realization that love conquered this. There was just the end of a conversation that took too long to happen. I'll call someone Monday, I said. Okay. Do you want to tell the kids together? We should. I stood up. She didn't. I walked toward the door, but stopped before I left. For what it's worth, I really did want this to work. I did too, she said, and for the first time, I believed her. But it didn't matter anymore. The papers were signed 2 weeks later. It wasn't fast because we rushed it. It was fast because we both knew dragging it out would be pointless. We agreed on the basics without much of a fight. The house would be sold, and we'd split the money down the middle. The kids, being teenagers, could decide where they wanted to stay, and we wouldn't force schedules or holidays. We agreed to alternate weekends if needed, but we both knew it would settle into something less formal, something built more on how much energy either of us had left to argue. Most of our conversations from that point on were short and transactional. Who's picking up groceries? What time the realtor is coming? Which drawer the documents were in? The warmth was gone, but at least the tension was too. Telling the kids was harder than the paperwork. We sat them down on a Sunday afternoon, the four of us in the living room, nobody touching their phones for once. Clara started, probably because she thought her voice would come across softer. She told them that we had been having problems for a while, that we both decided it was better to live apart, that none of it was their fault. I stayed quiet for most of it until our son asked me if we were mad at each other. No, I said, not anymore. Just tired. Our daughter cried, even though she tried to hide it. She pulled her sleeves over her hands and looked away, and I knew in that moment the damage was bigger than just between me and Clara. I'd done my part to hurt their mother, and even if they didn't know the whole story, the shift in the house was obvious. I couldn't take that part back. After they went to their rooms, Clara and I sat on the couch for a few minutes, neither of us ready to break the silence first. I'm moving in with Heather for now, she said eventually. All right. Once the house sells, I'll get a place near the kids. Sounds fine. You can stay here until then. I'll start looking for something next week. She nodded and stood up like she didn't want to drag it out. As she walked toward the hallway, she paused and turned back. Do you hate me? No, I said without thinking. I'm just done. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, it was just logistics. I didn't even tell many people. My coworkers probably assumed something was wrong, but no one asked. I didn't update my social media. I didn't explain it to friends who hadn't called in months. There didn't seem to be a point. The people who mattered already knew, and the rest could figure it out eventually. What surprised me most wasn't how angry I had been. It was how quickly the anger faded once the truth was out. I expected to stew in it, to relive every moment and pick it apart until I found something new to get upset about. But I didn't. After the confrontation, after the revenge, after the final conversation, it was like a switch flipped. I wasn't furious anymore. I wasn't sad every second. I was just empty, like someone had turned down the volume on everything. The day I moved out, the house was half empty. Some of the furniture had been moved already, boxes filled the corners, and the kitchen had more dust than dishes. I walked through each room once, not because I was sentimental, but because I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything behind. The last thing I picked up was a picture of us from 6 years ago, taken at a beach I barely remembered visiting. We looked happy in that photo, not perfect, just simple. I put it in a drawer before leaving. Now I live in a small apartment above a bakery. It's not much, but it's quiet, and the neighbors don't ask questions. The bed isn't as soft, the shower's a little weak, and the place smells like cinnamon every morning, which I've gotten used to. I work, I come home, I make dinner for one, and I don't spend as much time looking at my phone. I see the kids when they want to see me. Sometimes I miss the noise, the familiar routines, the random hugs that came without warning. But I don't miss her. Not anymore. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean you owe them forever. I learned that betrayal doesn't always come with screaming matches and broken glass. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated, and dressed in routine. I also learned that revenge doesn't feel like justice when you've lost what you were trying to protect. It just fills space where trust used to be. And once the dust settles, you're still left with the same choice. Move on or stay stuck. I'm not stuck. I'm not healed either. But I'm moving. That's enough for now.